at the moment I'm talking to you about the show and I know exactly what we've done, but it's only because we've finished. So I can be very articulate about what we are trying to achieve, how we've done it, and so on and so forth, because now we've finished. But when we're in the middle of doing it, I have no idea. Do you see what I mean? So it's not that, we don't start with the idea. We start, it's a very empirical process. We start by doing. We always bring objects into the room, for instance. And it's through the playing with these objects that little by little we develop movement sequences, physical sequences. And these moments at first, they don't really mean anything in terms of the storyline, for instance. They just focus on the use of weight, they focus on the use of rhythm, they focus on being sculpting, on being exciting visually. So we develop sequences that apparently have got nothing to do with anything. And then little by little, through the specificity of the work that we're doing physically, we're trying to project our imagination into it, right? But without trying to change the world all at once, or without trying to make it make sense straight away, but little by little, allowing it to grow, and we're allowing the material to take us towards the solution, or towards what we feel will make a coherent piece of theatre. And it's a similar process within the development of a sequence, but also within the development of putting the sequences together. And then what's exciting is that usually putting those sequences together, you need to transition from one to the other. And usually these transitions are the most exciting bits, because they are really the things that we could just not plan in our heads or anticipate. So it really comes out of what's happening on stage. So that's quite interesting, to sort of develop some sort of stage poetry, where the stage, what is developed on stage, could only be developed on stage. And therefore the metaphors that we're creating are unexpected. And so we are able to talk about things in an unexpected way, because we didn't set out to talk about these things in the first place, if that makes sense. So we're allowing the form to really inform the content. Now, the more we make work, we start to take a lot more ownership of that process. And so what I find myself in the process of doing is to try to be able to gently guide this exploration, but without ever being too forceful or too obvious, because the aim is for the performers to ideally find the solutions themselves. And if I sort of give a solution, it's bound to not be the right solution, or not the best possible solution, because I really believe that the most beautiful things are found within the doing of things, through making random unconscious connections, and then suddenly an image or a connection happens, and it just makes sense. It just makes sense. So that's what we're trying to find, and sometimes we find it, and sometimes we don't. There's a common saying here that the best idea in the room is the best idea in the room. You just can't argue with that. If it works, it works. And if people are not sure, then it probably means that it's not the best idea in the room. So I think that's one first idea there. I think, objects are really important for our work, and we use them in many different ways. But it's not something that we sort of decide consciously. It's just what has tended to happen over the past few shows where we've been working with object. We would often start with an object, and I would often bring an object. For the nature of forgetting, I would bring school desks, for instance. For births, I would bring a big dinner table and this enormous sheet that sort of hoovers around the stage constantly. And the idea behind that is first to have something to do, right? Because we start with not much. So if we've got something to manipulate, if we've got something to do, then it gives us something to do in the first place. So we can start doing action. So we can start playing. And the playing is really, it seems simple, but it's not. And it seems complicated, but actually it's really simple. So I'm not saying very much there, but it's about finding the inherent theatricality of the object. What is the object doing by itself without you having to manipulate it or do anything to it? So what has the object got to say? How can the object become a partner, something that has a voice? And then how can the object interact with the performer? And I'm mainly talking here in terms of shapes, in terms of things that can be created where one, here mainly the performers and possibly me, the director, can throw their imagination into it, so that we can create something with the object that was not expected, right? So it's not about manipulating the object, it's about transforming the object. A simple example might be, in the show in Birth, we have a tablecloth, and then it can become a wedding dress. So it's about allowing the object to not only be there for what it is, but can also become something else without manipulating the object. For instance, if I was going to take my pencil and then pretend it's a phone, that would be exactly what we're not looking for, because that would be me using the object for what it's not, and I would be manipulating the object. I would be forcing the object into something that it's not. So what we're looking for is to see how can the object become something else? How can the object transform? So sometimes we would also not start with the object, we would just start with movement. And then to bring an object at the end will ground the whole thing. It will ground the whole sequence. In the nature of forgetting, for instance, we had, with two actors, we developed a duet for a very long time, and it was a beautiful duet, but in terms of where it sat, what sort of imagination could go into it, it was very confusing, until suddenly we decided that the girl in the duet would be wearing a wedding dress, and then suddenly it just worked. The performer was taking the wedding dress out, and it was there. A beautiful love-making sequence. So that was quite interesting to see how you can bring an object at the end, and it can be at the start, but it can also be at the end, and it'll ground the whole thing. Sometimes you can do the opposite. You can start working with an object and then get rid of it, and then it would open up the possibilities. There's a beautiful sequence in I mean, of course I'd say it's a beautiful sequence, but there's a very interesting sequence in Birth, and it's a relationship between a father and a son, and it's very tender, and originally that movement quality was found with a pillow. So the two performers were playing with a pillow for a very long time. And for as long as the pillow was there, even though the movement sequence was beautiful, no one really knew where that was going, where it was going. And then until we just removed the pillow, and then suddenly the sequence appeared. And so that relationship with object is very empirical. And there are lots of ways. There are lots of ways that I'm sure we haven't been able to sort of discover yet, but we're just going to keep playing with object. I think there's one key reference here. It's is the work of a Polish theatre director called Tadeusz Kantor, and he used to talk about object, and he used to talk about a certain category of object called the poor object, and that really resonates with us as to what a poor object is. At least definitely with me. I find it really inspiring. So whenever I ask people to bring an object, they need to be specific, but they need to be poor objects, so that we can work with them. I think one leading principle for us is that we never try to do what we do just to do what we're doing, but we're trying to do something else. So we're not, doing a magic trick just to do a magic trick. The magic trick has to serve something else. It has to open the door to a different world, to the world of the imagination. It has to do something else, has to achieve something else. We're never doing a piece of movement just because we want to display how good we are physically, So it's never about a display of skills, or it's not about showing off the abilities that we have, or even experimenting for the sake of experimenting. It's always about doing something else. So we're not doing the things that we do to do what we're doing. We're doing them to do something else. So we're always looking for ways of communicating, ways of expressing ourselves. So we're using magic, we're using corporal mime, we're using music, we're using lights, we're using props, we're using voice, we're using sounds, we put them all together so that they can communicate something else, so that we can get on or beyond the realm of the medium, go beyond the realm of the medium itself. And I think that's quite key. I think the moment we try to do something just because we can do it, then I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So on top of that, I think it's important to say that we will only keep in the show what is absolutely necessary to the show, even though there might be things that we absolutely adore and we think they're great. If they're not absolutely necessary, then we'll get rid of them. So I think that's one way of approaching it, is to make sure that everything has a sense of purpose within the general picture of the piece. Yeah, you see, I'm just going to contradict what I've just said. This is great. So in some instances, I think when you start, then of course you need to start by doing something. So for instance, we had this big cloth in tablecloth in Birth, and it was just so tempting to just make people disappear and make people reappear, to have some quick changes. It was just so tempting to be able to do that, because we had that cloth, and also we had that table, and so you can disappear, reappear, you can change very quickly, you can do so many things in terms of just that became, through the playing of it became a little bit our language. It became a little bit our physical language. So something that's just started as an interest in using magic as a tool here to just play, became a movement language. So we have movement sequences where people just rotate around the table and they keep disappearing and reappearing in different places. And every time they reappear, they've got different props. Some props have disappeared. But ideally, if we do our job well, when people come and see the show, they shouldn't focus too much on, oh, that has disappeared. Oh, this is gone. Oh, this has changed. But ideally, this serves the journey that the characters are going through. And, for instance, we use the birthday cake, for instance, and the birthday cake goes from 3 candles to like 5 candles. So it's to show the passage of time. Do you see? So it's always about using the props, using the tools in order to do something else. When we first start with it, it's just to do something. We just need to do something. And we had this immense cloth as well. It would have been a shame to not do a few quick change and. No, I think I think it could be an interesting exercise to create various pieces of work with a similar object. As a formal exercise, I think it'd be very interesting. In the same way that some people are giving very simple instructions, and then different performers are sort of trying to do a different show following the same set of instructions. So as a formal experimentation, I think it's potentially quite exciting. If you have the same chair, the same step ladder, or the same bed, or how can you make or create different worlds around each object. But that's not so much what we're interested in. For us, each object is so much the catalyst of everything that happens in the show. It brings everything together. It's the glue with everything that is going on around the show. So much attached to specific worlds that once we've worked with an object on a specific show, then we then we want to do something else. Also, we spend so much time with these objects on every show that it's kind of nice to be able to work with different things, you know. Well, first of all, I'd say I really hope to be able to bring the work to South Korea again soon, so that all these words can translate into something real. Because at the end of the day, talking about the work is one thing, and it might sound very great, but actually the work might be very different. And so it's interesting. I mean, even though I think this is really important, I think it should always accompany the work. It should not replace the work, because at the end of the day, the work is the most important thing. So I really hope that we'll be able to come and share our work in the not too distant future, so we can engage in those conversations, and so that people can actually question what I've said and challenge it in a very healthy way to allow the discussion to progress further. So that, I think, would be really exciting. And I think the other thing that maybe I should say is good luck.